Welcome. My name is Nitin Dahad. I'm Editor-in-Chief of EE Times, and I'm thankful to Hardware Pioneers Max for giving us this opportunity to have a fireside chat with Eben Upton, the founder and CEO of Raspberry Pi. Hello, Eben.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good, I think. Yes, I've just recovered from our first annual results roadshow as a public company, so I'm just coming down a little bit.
Oh wow! Nice. Okay, that must have been fun.
Yeah, lots of fun.
Okay, good.
Talking about tariffs most of the time, I think.
Yes, that's what shareholders like.
I was in Edinburgh talking to investors about tariffs, and I probably 75% of 5 meetings, 75% of the time talking about tariffs. Got off the plane at Stansted, turned my phone on, and I'm like, God damn it. It's all changed.
Exactly. I think most of the people in this room probably have read things about you, and so I'm not going to go into your background, your profile, but let's talk a little bit about how the journey for Raspberry Pi since, well, the foundation in 2008 and then the 2010 for the Raspberry Pi company. Yeah. So what have been the trends that you followed along with the industry trends, and how has it driven your evolution?
I guess as an organization we've been on several journeys in parallel. So this is an organization we set up in 2008, try to get young people excited about computers in the same way that I was excited about computers as a child, the same way I'm still excited about computers.
On that,
just to be clear, I am still excited about computers.
We both had things like ZX81s, Spectrum,
and so we're like a lot of people here. I guess we're children of the 1980s. Came from an environment, I guess, as young people where we were surrounded by ambient programmability by accident, right? I mean, there was nothing intentional about it. There was a period of time when the cheapest thing you could build to play computer games, or the cheapest thing you could build to be a word processor, happened to be a general purpose computer. And you're surrounded with these things, and you buy them for one of these other reasons, and you are then lured into programming. And that's a sort of probably a general description of the people I was surrounded with.
And that was like BASIC and then 6502 assembler and
that's right. Stuff. The wonderful experience of having a BBC Micro that had that kind of extremely smooth progression from BASIC into assembly language. And so that's probably a pretty good description of the people I was surrounded by at university. It's a pretty good description of the people I worked with when I was a semiconductor engineer at Broadcom, and the people, anyone between the ages of probably 30, 35 and 55, 60 at Raspberry Pi today has had some variant of that route into computing.
And I mean, I know I'm jumping the gun here, but I think one of the things I think you pride yourself on is people who you employ at Raspberry Pi are all sort of competent in those specific areas like programming or whatever.
Yes, absolutely. We try and hire competent people, do competent work. I think that there is always that sense that the people who tend to work in technical roles at Raspberry Pi tend to be people who've had both a hobbyist interest and some sort of academic grounding in computing. Right. So really, Raspberry Pi, the disappearance of those computers, that programmable hardware from children's lives, led to a collapse in interest in computing and a collapse in applicant numbers to the University of Cambridge. I think we went from something like 600 applicants a year in 1999 to roughly 200 in 2008, the year we founded the foundation. So you're kind of at a point, the university had got to a point that it wasn't admitting anyone who wasn't good, but it got to a point where it was admitting everybody who was good. And that's a situation where you can't accommodate any further shrinkage of the applicant pool without either having to shrink the course or compromise your standards. And so this is kind of where Raspberry Pi comes from. It's really it starts off trying to get young people excited about computing. Takes us a little while, took us 3 or 4 years to go from that kind of initial concept. And the idea was always to produce a physical object, a piece of hardware. To go from that realization, that concept of what we wanted to build, to having something we could build and to having something we put in the market. So we launch in February 2012, the 29th of February 2012, so we don't have many birthday parties. And it's really, the birthday parties we do have are generally spectacular, but we save up for 3 years. So we launched this product, and of course, the people you sell to are not kids, right? So we sold 100,000 Raspberry Pis on the first day to people like the people in this room, right? You're selling to people who already know about computers, who already know about electronics. And I guess the journey the first journey we went on was from being very education focused to being very enthusiast focused. And then the second journey that we went on, pair of journeys we went on, having sold to enthusiasts, that those enthusiasts turned out to be the key to our impact in education, because so many of those enthusiasts are parents or teachers or volunteers. We have an amazing tradition in this country of volunteering. Many of the enthusiasts we sold Raspberry Pis to on the 29th of February 2012 went and took those Raspberry Pis with them into code clubs, computing clubs that they were volunteering in. So a lot of the early impact, and obviously the Raspberry Pi Foundation, which started as a charity, the foundation today does a lot of regular sort of engagement with the formal education community, but the early educational impact of Raspberry Pi was this kind of anarchic clubs-based world. So a lot of our early impact was there, but then the other journey we've been on, so many of those people are professional design engineers, and they take Raspberry Pi with them into work. And we're not the first people to walk down this road. I think Arduino walked down this road kind of 5 years before us.
Yeah,
but it is a well understood kind of path from enthusiasm to industrial and embedded adoption.
And I think we talked about this earlier about that change, from 2012 to where we are today in terms of the phases of Raspberry Pi, and I think you just alluded to that. But what anything specific that you think is like that was a wow moment or a transition moment?
I think a couple of things. There was definitely a transition, and we'll come back. This has happened to us again recently. There was a transition in 2015 when we launched Raspberry Pi 2, the quad Cortex A7 based successor to the original platform. Partly because it was an enormously more powerful device. It was about 6 times, for a multi-threaded workload, had about 6 times the CPU performance of the original product. But I think as important was the idea of having a product line, of having a second product, that when you launch your second product, you are implicitly saying to people, we're serious about this, we are not a flash in the pan, we will be around for a while. And so you saw this big uptick in the aftermath of Raspberry Pi 2, a big uptick in industrial adoption, not just of Raspberry Pi 2, but also of Raspberry Pi 1, because people could have confidence and people would look at that product line and say, I'm going to pick that point on the line, I'm going to put that point. It's not a point, it's a line now. And we still sell Raspberry Pi 1s, of course. I think a distinctive thing about us is that we still support, if you go and download Raspberry Pi OS from the website today, and you were one of those 29th of February people, you can run Raspberry Pi OS on your 29th of February 2012 Raspberry Pi quite slowly. Yeah. But that idea of, kind of continuous support, I sold 451 Raspberry Pi 1s last month. Right, so you can still buy.
Yeah. 451.
Yeah.
That was in your figures, I guess.
Yeah, that's it. It's an easy number to remember because it's the temperature at which paper catches fire. Okay. Any Bradbury fan?
That's good. And then I guess we'll talk about the technology later in terms of the other transitions. But in that evolution, you've also transformed from being sort of hobbyist to industrial, and I think even more so since the IPO. And I think, I've jumped the gun a bit, but I think it's quite interesting in terms of follow-up from that. Yeah,
so I think you see probably by the tipping point's probably 2018, 2019, around about the time of the launch of Raspberry Pi 4, you see us going over 50% industrial and embedded. So industrial, people using Raspberry Pi themselves in an industrial context, so that's people doing factory automation. I think Brompton's a great example from our website. The Brompton Bicycle Factory is entirely automated with Raspberry Pis, right? And so people buying them and building their own bespoke industrial process automation, production automation, test automation solution, or embedded, people building products around Raspberry Pi. And that tipping point probably came in 2018, 2019, and we're now at a point where of the 7 or 8 million Raspberry Pis that we sell in a year, something like 80% of them are going into either an industrial or an embedded context.
And I think I'll come on to education in a second because it's actually quite a good follow-on from there. I think, is it because, and it goes into the trends, the complexity today means working with something like a Raspberry Pi or an Arduino or a Logic Fruit, whatever it is much easier to implement. And you just said Bromptons are using it here for their factory automation.
Yeah, I think there's this idea.
And there's some kind of boiling point as well.
Yeah, there's kind of a boiling point. So there's and that boiling point has moved over time. So I think successive generations of SoC, successive generations of silicon are becoming harder to work with, both from a hardware perspective, a hardware design perspective. The signal integrity and power integrity challenges of doing a good implementation of a modern high-performance ARM SoC are quite substantial, and they also become more challenging to work with from a software perspective. Just the size of the code base, the size of the board support increases over the years. And what that tends to do, I think, is push not just towards Raspberry Pi, but it tends to push people at mid-volume OEMs out to 10, 20, 30,000 units a year, tends to push OEMs to consider modular solutions. There are quite a few module vendors here at the show, right?
Yeah.
And really, I think that's a demonstration of this trend towards people wanting a degree of abstraction between them and the silicon and the more modern silicon platforms. That's gone up over time. I think there's another interesting point. Of course, that's an economic calculation, right? That it is expensive to maintain the team that can maintain a chip-on-board implementation, hardware implementation, and board support in production for an extended period of time. And therefore, if you need to amortize the cost of that team across 1,000 units, the allocated per unit cost of that team is very high. Yeah. So there is a kind of an economically rational board-off point, and our kind of current estimate of that is about 50,000 units a year is the point where we find our modular customers starting to kind of look at the door a little bit. If they've made a make-buy calculation at 1,000 units and they've chosen to buy at 50,000 units, maybe they do the calculation again, they run the spreadsheet again and decide to make. I think what's interesting, though, and back to the point about education, and back to there still being problems, even though the foundation has had an amazing impact on computing education in the UK, there are still talent pipeline challenges to solve. We actually find an increasing number of our modular customers staying with us well beyond what you might imagine as the economically rational point to transition back to make, simply because of the challenges involved in sourcing the engineering talent. Just because you think, well, I've got to staff up a 5 to 10 engineer team to do this. Well, you can build a spreadsheet that tells you to do it, but where are you going to find the 5 to 10 engineers?
And I mean, the other thing I think point you made about that is software and your sort of backwards and forwards compatibility. So when you build a team, they already know how to work on that, and then if you need to scale up, then it helps you to still keep that software operating system.
Yeah, that's right, and I think that's a lesson that we've learned over the years. Whenever we have, we're all technologists, right? We're all enthusiasts. We're all perfectionists. We all like to build perfect things. We all like to build beautiful things. And the temptation when you do a new platform is always to change everything. And I think we were lucky with Raspberry Pi 2 and Raspberry Pi 3. They are very incremental evolutions. They're incremental evolutions of the Raspberry Pi 1 platform because our volumes then were small enough we couldn't justify a complete new SoC development. And so we were kind of forced for a couple of generations to have very incremental changes to the platform, and that got us used to incremental change. And so Raspberry Pi 4 is the first time in 2019 is the first time that the entire Raspberry Pi platform had been re-implemented. So it's a port from 40 nanometers down to 28. So you have this big change from Raspberry Pi 3, 3 Plus to Raspberry Pi 4. But what we'd learned by that time was not to take advantage of all of the flexibility that change brought with us. And and then the same thing with Raspberry Pi 5. Now Raspberry Pi 5 launched in 2023, actually an even more radical change to the philosophical underpinnings of the platform, because of course we go from a monolithic SoC, the 40 nanometer monolithic SoC compute and I/O, 28 nanometer monolithic SoC, to a chiplet architecture for Raspberry Pi 5, where we have the BCM2712 16 nanometer logic chip, which is almost purely a fast digits chip. It's almost entirely digital. And then you have the RP1 chip, so for the first time, a big Raspberry Pi with Raspberry Pi design silicon on it. That's a huge philosophical change. But when we were designing the change, we did our very, very, very best to minimize the impact, the amount of impact of that change above the abstraction layer that we present to our customers. And that's been good for customers, I think, because it's allowed them to move backwards and forwards, up and down the product line. But more importantly, it's been good for us because it's allowed us to support 3 quite different generations of technology, classic, 4 and 5, with one software team. And that's how I am still able to sell Raspberry Pi 1s, supported Raspberry Pi
451.
451 of them, because I don't have to have a Raspberry Pi 1 software team. I just have a Raspberry Pi software team.
Well, it's fascinating. So in the world of design automation and embedded systems, people are now getting excited about things like chiplets, but you're a very good case study of something on a small computer board where you've actually architected that pretty cleverly.
Yeah, and this is a measure of the kind of planning horizons. RP1, the I/O chiplet that's on Raspberry Pi 5, we started work on that in the summer of 2015, and we launched Raspberry Pi 5 in the autumn of 2023. So these are very, very long planning horizons. And, something that the word for that architecture was not chiplet in 2015. It was like the kind of the realization that it is often...
It was modules or blocks or something like that.
Yeah, that's it. But the idea that you should factorize the functionality, you try to find ways to factorize the functionality in an SoC into things which are best implemented on different process nodes, and then glue them together using some kind of interconnect. Now, we use PCI Express as our interconnect, which is not an optimal chiplet interconnect, but the interesting thing about it, of course, is it's standards-based. And what that allowed us to do was that allowed us to develop the core logic chiplet at Broadcom and the I/O chiplet at Raspberry Pi, and you had PCI Express as if you were doing it all in one when AMD do chiplets, right? They don't have to use a standards-based chiplet interface. We did, but actually the penalty is not that bad. I mean, the main concern people have about PCI Express for chiplets is latency and energy per bit, and it's actually not too bad. It actually works pretty well.
So it depends on the application, but
we have some pretty big buffers. The real-time masters in RP1 have some pretty big buffers in them to accommodate the high and variable latency of PCI Express.
So you reminded me. I'm going to use this example for our chiplet conference in June, which we're doing at E Times.
We were doing chiplets before it was cool.
I'm going to be using that example. So if any of you are coming to San Francisco for DAC, you'll see me ask that question. Let's talk a little bit about education, because that's kind of where you started from. And your background is you're a very studied person. You like to program. You like to do computing. You've done all kinds of stuff. Do you feel you're still true to what you sort of started Raspberry Pi Foundation and where it's heading? Because you've got this little thing where you have to go, for the obviously the shareholders, the stock market, but also to keep the hobbyists and the enthusiasts and education community still pleased.
Yeah, so alongside that, I guess that market journey from education to enthusiast to industrial and embedded, and then the technological journey from 40 nanometer monolithic single core to 16 nanometer quad core chiplet. You have a corporate structure journey as well. So we start off, the Raspberry Pi Foundation is a UK not-for-profit, UK charity. Start that in 2008. For the first 9 months or so of trading, it was the foundation that sold Raspberry Pis. And then in December of 2012, we pull the trading activities out from under the foundation for a variety of good reasons, as a wholly owned subsidiary for about roughly the next 8 years, right? And over that time, we returned about $50 million of gift aid. So what would happen? The trading company would make profits, and then it would donate those profits to its shareholder. And we returned about $50 million. The foundation's always been quite good at leveraging that money, so it's able to go out and take that money and go and secure philanthropic money, individual philanthropic money, or corporate philanthropic money, or government programs. So it's quite good at kind of growing that money. That's not all the money they have available. So we do this. In 2021, we pull in some external capital, raise about $45 million of external capital, about $500 million pre-money valuation. So this is an organization. So the foundation, at that point, its shareholding in Raspberry Pi trading was worth $500 million, right? And this is an organisation which was started with a £100,000 loan that I and a couple of other people made.
That was in 2008.
That was, yes, in 2008 we loaned it £100,000. We get our money back eventually, and then suddenly the foundation sat there. It's received $50 million of funding. It has an asset which is worth $500 million, right? And so we go and we raise $45 million externally. We, for the first time, have some external shareholders, Ezra and Lansdowne, financial shareholders. Lansdowne, a hedge fund. Ezra, an impact investor.
Okay.
So a sort of kind of very charitably focused impact investor. But for the first time, you have external shareholders, right? You have somebody else to answer to. Now you have the nicest possible people to answer to, but they are nonetheless you no longer have a single shareholder. You have a community of shareholders. 2023 raised another $15 million. This time from strategic investors, from Sony and from Arm. And then last year, IPO'd the company. It was quite a journey, right? I think the nice thing was it's a gradual journey. And at the IPO, so the foundation raised another $180 million at the IPO, sold about a third of its shareholding. So for every share it sold, it's still got 2 shares. And so you kind of have this organization, which is effectively, it's a charity, it's broadly a charity unicorn. So the foundation assets are roughly $1 billion, right? But the nice thing about the journey was it was a very gradual journey. And so you had time to acclimatize yourself to this gradually expanding pool of shareholders, gradually expanding pool of stakeholders around the organisation. It's been interesting. I'm still enjoying it. That's the surprise for me. I am an inveterate doer of things for 4 years. That's my time constant for doing things, and I've been doing Raspberry Pi for very nearly 20 years, right? And the interesting thing for me is it's still enjoyable. It's still enjoyable. There's always that question: will it still be enjoyable when you're a public company? And that's been the great thing that's happened in the last year. Is I still get into work with a smile on my face.
That is, because
I don't always get off a plane with a smile on my face. But
and I think I was going to ask you what's changed, and I think it seems like for personally nothing's changed, but from a company point of view, are there lots of different sort of pressures on you now to sort of do things differently, or are you allowed to do things the way you want to do?
I think there was some really understandable concern, particularly in the enthusiast community. There was really understandable concern that being a public company might change our focus, particularly in terms of how much investment we could make in engineering, in platform development, and how focused we would be on monetizing the platforms, how aggressive we would try and be about making money. I think the thing, and really what we said at the time was, well, just watch us, right? Just if in 5 years' time we've still not, I think this word enshittification, right? The idea that you'll put up prices or you'll drive down quality or something. That you will be extremely focused on short-term value. And I think what we said was, look, give us a year, give us 2 years, give us 5 years. If in 5 years' time we are still obviously the same organisation, then could you at least admit that we haven't done that? I think what people need to remember is that for a very, very long time, we were the wholly owned subsidiary of the Raspberry Pi Foundation, which is a charitable foundation that I founded to do a thing that I care about incredibly, incredibly deeply, right? And so we were always focused on making money, right? What is more motivating than knowing that the money you make is going to go and fund the thing that you care about the most, right? So I didn't believe there would be a change. I think probably if you look at our product launch behavior over the last 10 months, you can see that there has definitely been a focus on getting stuff out the door. So we launched more products, mostly accessory products, but a couple of core products like CM5 and Pico 2 in the second half of last year. We launched more products in the second half of last year than we've launched in any previous whole year, right? And there is definitely a focus there where you're saying, hang on a second, shouldn't we try and make some money? And that was genuinely a surprise to me, in that I thought that I was already maximally, because of the the destination of the money.
Yeah.
I had thought that I was already maximally focused, but there is something about knowing that you're going to have to report, and that you're going to have to report to a large community of people.
Yeah.
An enormous community. But we have a large and very loyal. We're lucky to have a large and very loyal retail shareholder base, for example. Knowing that you are going to have to account for yourself to such a large audience does cause you to have to cast around a little bit and try to think about ways to make a little more money.
I guess some of the things that you've done, I mean, not because of the IPO, but I went into one of your stores in Cambridge, and does that help?
It is the only store.
Oh, they told me they were
there. Yeah.
Okay, all right, fine.
There was briefly another one in Leeds. And there are pop-ups as well. But
Sorry?
There are pop-ups as well, but it is the only permanent store.
But I think we're having that conversation that although it's kind of like that image, isn't it? So, and you've got Apple downstairs, so you just wonder, like,
we're looking down on them over there. So.
Yeah, exactly.
The other fruit company.
Yeah. Eben Upton said, "We are looking down on Apple."
There we are.
Sorry. But does that help in that sort of image to the shareholders and stuff like that?
I think what the store has really done for us is it's given us a venue for meeting. I guess for meeting, it's given us three things. It's given us a venue for meeting our enthusiast customers, right? So it's given us a place that we can go and meet the people who are most enthusiastic about Raspberry Pi, and that's always really, really heartening, because I think we have to remember doing something like Raspberry Pi requires energy. And things that increase your supply of energy are good, and just being able to go somewhere and meet people and have conversations with people who really deeply care about the platform is really helpful to us. So that's one thing. It also lets us meet the people who aren't yet sold, and I think this is probably more important. It lets us meet the people who aren't yet sold on the idea that computing is for them. So parents who've been dragged in by their kids who've been dragged in by their parents, and who know that this is maybe a thing for this is a thing for them, but they need to be told why, and they need to have their hand held as they go through that process of going from diffuse enthusiasm to specific enthusiasm, and that's really helpful. And then the last thing it's given us, the simple thing, an opportunity to see all of our products next to each other on a shelf. And the interesting thing when we started the store was we put all our products on the shelf, and you look how you sort of saw that they were not visually coherent with each other. You saw that people were sometimes struggling to understand. Within a year of the store launching, what had happened to our product line? One, all of our boxes looked the same, so when you put them on the shelf, they look nice together. The other thing was we had done a lot more kitting activity, because that second audience often needed help to understand what the total set of things, but someone in this room, you go buy a Raspberry Pi and you know the things that you can scrounge up all the bits. And the dream with Raspberry Pi, why we always just sold Raspberry Pi as a bare board, was we knew a lot of our customers could, at a push, scrounge up a monitor, a keyboard, a power supply, a mouse, and some sort of box to put it in. But that second audience really needs to have their hands held. So an enormous amount of kitting activity, and it's things you would never have imagined.
No, I think I remember when I went into the store, and I posted a LinkedIn post, because I sort of put some historic posts from ARM and other sort of historic people from Cambridge, and I thought this is just quite apt, having the Raspberry Pi store in Cambridge.
And I still love to go in there. It's a good experience for me on a Saturday morning with my kids.
I mean, with that, and I had a question last night from somebody which I'm going to ask anyway. Does it still help with selling solutions to sort of school children who want, or clubs at schools that want to build something and do it easily?
Yes, it's still education. I think one way in which the meaning of education has changed for us is increasingly, and I think the pandemic did this for us actually, the arrival of Raspberry Pi 4 and the pandemic, is that Raspberry Pi in education now is as much about computing for education as it is about computing education. So increasingly we see people, certainly my daughter turned 8 last weekend, and for the last 18 months she has had a Raspberry Pi in her bedroom and she uses it as a PC, right? And so provision...
But you can buy those in Cambridge, you can buy them as a PC.
That's it, right? You can buy them as a PC, and it's very easy to go and buy them as a PC. We were lucky. Raspberry Pi 4 really was the first Raspberry Pi that was really a PC for a general audience, and that had rocked up, and we had a decent bit of inventory in our hands in the spring of 2020, meant that we were able to do, at scale, some interventions with less advantaged children in the UK to give them. Because you had people who were sent home to study from home when all they had is 3 kids with mum or dad's smartphone, right? Yeah. And so being able to make a difference there was it was very, at a difficult time, obviously. It was a very kind of heartening thing for us, and it's a thing we've tried to stay in contact with as time has gone on. And as we've got to Raspberry Pi 5, which has gone from being a good enough PC to, I guess, being, certainly from my daughter's perspective, indistinguishable from any other PC platform.
Well, I think I can imagine my grandchildren doing it soon as well. But we're sort of coming to the end of our session. I want you to reflect on what have been the key sort of changes that you've seen in your career, but also through Raspberry Pi, and that overlap between the enthusiast and the professional, but also maybe anything else you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think, that idea that making things for enthusiasts leads fairly inevitably to widespread embedded and industrial adoption has been interesting. As I say, not the first people to walk down this road, but it's been interesting to be in an organization which is going through that evolution and managing the storytelling as you do that, staying true to your enthusiast roots as you increasingly build products, as you evolve all of your products and the messaging and the collateral around your products to appeal to an industrial and embedded audience. And as you start to produce products like the compute module, which are very explicitly for the industrial audience. I think the thing that has allowed us to do that is the quality of the people who work for us, the sort of people who work for us. There's this idea about classic era Apple, that classic era of Apple until 2010 was a company that built products that Steve wanted to buy.
Yep.
And it happened that there were huge numbers of people who wanted to buy the products that Steve wanted to buy. And I think that that's what we do still. We build the products, and that's not just the SBC products or the modular products, that's the semiconductor products, the microcontroller products. We are enthusiasts, we are professional design engineers. We build the products that we want to buy. We don't focus group much because we are our own focus group. And the nice thing about that is it means that every product we make has at least one. You compare that to the focus group based way of deciding what to build. Every product that we build has at least one person who wants to buy it, even if they happen to work for us. It is just that wonderful sense of a group of people, very large, 136 people now. Although we are about the smallest FTSE 250 company, about 136 people across communications, engineering, finance, support, all kind of moving forwards together.
When you get to 451, there'll be a party.
Yeah, that's it, right. Yeah, we'll have a bonfire.
Well, Eben Upton, thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much indeed.
Bang on 310. Thank you.